and welcome to World Insight, coming to you live from Beijing on CCTV News. I'm your host, Tian Wei. On today's program, China's role in the Middle East. As President Xi wraps up a trip to the region, what lies ahead? And a backlash about race. The Oscars are facing criticism once again for a lack of diversity. And will suggested voter quotas be enough to remedy the problem? Welcome to World Insight. Chinese President Xi Jinping returned home after wrapping up a productive trip to Saudi Arabia, Egypt, and Iran with 52 cooperation agreements. The fruitful 5-day Middle East tour demonstrated China's continued focus on building a new type of international relations featuring win-win cooperation.
President Xi Jinping's first foreign tour of the new year took him to 3 countries in 5 days. Upgrading ties and boosting cooperation have topped China's agenda. In Saudi Arabia, the first leg of the trip, the 2 countries signed a total of 14 agreements, including massive oil deals to speed up China Gulf region free trade talk. Other deals include building a nuclear reactor and an accord to work together on the Belt and Road Initiative. China also upgraded its diplomatic relations with Saudi Arabia to a comprehensive strategic partnership, which will position the 2 countries for closer cooperation in various other areas. On President Xi's second stop in Egypt, the 2 sides signed 21 deals, including one to build a new administrative capital and another to develop an industrial and commercial hub around Egypt's Suez Canal. The 2 sides also signed a 5-year outline document to boost cooperation in politics, trade, and economy, as well as the military and security. The last leg was in Iran, where President Xi and his Iranian counterpart mapped out a 25-year plan to broaden relations. 17 accords were inked there. Major pacts include cooperation in nuclear energy and a revival of the ancient Silk Road trade route. The 2 countries also agreed to increase bilateral trade by more than tenfold to $600 billion in the next decade. China and Iran also upgraded their ties to a comprehensive strategic partnership. With growing economic ties in the Middle East, China will aim to promote peace and stability in the region, President Xi said.
Instead of looking for a proxy in the Middle East, we promote peace talks. Instead of seeking any sphere of influence, we call on all parties to join the circle of friends for the Belt and Road initiatives.
Meanwhile, some experts say China's growing focus on the Middle East could be significant for the rest of the world.
This visit also shows China's hope for a stable international order and world peace. China also hopes to make efforts for the peace in the Middle East region. As for the Belt and Road Initiative, I think this initiative will bring the opportunities of peaceful development and advances for many countries.
The next 10 years are crucial for China in the Middle East. Under the spirit of the Belt and Road Initiative, the 2 sides will boost more win-win cooperation, upgrade political ties, and promote mutual learning.
And for more on this, we are joined in Paris by Ms. He Wenping, who is a research fellow of the Institute of Western Asian and African Studies at the Chinese Academy of Social Sciences. In Tehran, we are joined by Mr. Mohammad Marandi, associate professor from the University of Tehran. And in Jeddah, Saudi Arabia, we are having Mr. Khaled Batarfi, who is assistant professor at Al Faisal University. Welcome to the 3 of you. Let me begin with you, Professor Marandi. We understand Chinese President Xi Jinping's trip to Iran is the first foreign leader's trip ever to Iran after most of the sanctions are being lifted. What does that mean for the potential of cooperation between China and Iran?
Well, there's enormous potential. Not only does Iran and China trade through the Persian Gulf and the high seas, but also there's an enormous potential that exists in the north of Iran, and that is Central Asia and the revival of the ancient Silk Road. The Iranians and the Chinese have agreed to build the infrastructure in order that for high-speed railways and highways, as well as potentially oil and gas pipelines, can go through this area. And if this hopefully is constructed, then within the next few years we will see a dramatic rise in trade between Iran and China, and Central Asia too will benefit very much. And also countries like Iraq and Syria and Afghanistan, which have road links to Iran, and there are developments with regards to railways and roads between these countries. These two could be linked up to the ancient Silk Road, which would make it a much larger market.
Ms. He, well, before the sanctions were lifted, China not only observed the UN sanctions against Iran, but also at the same time did businesses with Iran. But now sanctions are being lifted, more opportunities for the other countries as well. What does that mean for China?
Well, I think that will means more opportunity and more cooperation projects will be taking place between China and Iran. As you mentioned,
more competition
even during
maybe?
the sanction time.
More competition maybe? China
Yes.
with other countries in terms of seeking
yes.
opportunities in Iran?
Right. Yes, apart from a cooperation opportunity, another thing is the competition. There'll be more competition between China and the Western companies, because the Western companies all ready to go into Iran to do investment. But those competition, I don't think it's a bad thing, because economic competition is also do good for Chinese companies to upgrade their technical know-how, their management skill, and also even their technical those know-how skill. So we are not afraid of any competition from other international companies. Actually, we can through this process to improve our own capacity. Plus, that the Iranian government also said they have appreciated very much with China's engagement with Iran, even during the sanction time. So they will continue to support China's companies to engage further with Iranian economic development. So we also can get continuous support from Iranian government and Iranian companies.
Mr. Badawi, you've been patiently listening to the other panelists. Let me ask you though, China seemed to play a balanced diplomacy between Saudi Arabia and Iran. Just looking at the Chinese president's trip, his itinerary, you could almost have an idea. What does that mean for Saudi Arabia? And particularly when Iran's sanctions have been lifted by most of the Western countries, where is the potential for China and Saudi Arabia?
Well, it's always good business, make good life. When people have a choice between building or breaking, it's always a good idea to get them engaged and busy with building stuff and development than going to war to get what they want. So I believe spreading this investment opportunity around the region will get the region a better hope for a future of cooperation among all the nations and between them and their international partners. And of course, China is the second biggest economy in the world. And if not China is there, who would be? I mean, the China economy could absorb all the extra money these countries need to invest in the world, and also these countries could use the talents and the investment of the Chinese company that proved through history that they are very reliable, honest, and hardworking.
Right. And Ms. He, let me ask you, just follow what Mr. Badawi just said. The crude oil, the prices of it has been going down very dramatically over the past few weeks. Some suspect that trend will continue for some time. Of course, that is not necessarily going to have any direct impact on China's relations with countries such as Iran, such as Saudi Arabia. But also the other thing that we need to look at is China's necessity of developing deeper ties with these countries also have something to do with the country's need and necessity for oil for its future development. So what would all of these new trends mean for China's policy?
Well, I think there are two kinds of meanings for China's policy with those countries. First is when the President Xi visited those three countries in the Middle East, one thing he has attached a great importance is to establish a very reliable resources relationship with Saudi, with Iran. This reliable means that we will continue to be a consuming market for the oil, gas from Iran and Saudi, and also Saudi and Iran, they will continue to be a very reliable suppliers to China's needs. So this kind of sustainable relationship will be there. And secondly, I think that is we are going to help Saudi and Iran to develop their diversified economy, because each of them, they don't want to rely only on their resources, only on the oil income or oil revenue. They, according to their next 5-year plan or 7 years plan, from both countries, one of the key elements in their future plan is to diversify the economy, like to develop their communication and the finance cooperation with China and the infrastructure building and the industry, manufacturing industry, and all of them, they want to get China's investment in to build like an industry zone. So through all those measures and those treaties we have signed with them, I think we will contribute to develop their diversified economy. So that will be another way out for this resources dependency economic structure.
But on the other hand, Mr. Badavi, we look at the wonderful picture of cooperation in your region between China and countries like yours, Saudi Arabia, or where Professor Marandi comes from, Iran. At the same time, though, we look at also the geopolitical complexities inside your region. After all, Iraq, after all, Syria are still in the turmoil. So let me ask you about this. Both of your countries, Iran and Saudi Arabia, are talking about taking part into China's project of so-called One Belt, One Road, or Silk Road initiative. But how much would these geopolitical complex in a way hinder the development or your involvement into this grand plan?
Well, I believe this is two different lines: the economic cooperation and the political issues in Syria, Iraq, or Yemen. China could cooperate. It has been cooperating with these countries for ages, regardless of all the historical events and turmoils in the region. We shouldn't wait for these issues to end. For example, the Israeli occupation of Palestine has been there for a long time, and this region witnessed many wars. But China, through all this, were extending its cooperative hands to these regions in trade and in commerce and in cooperation, development cooperations, and not giving a note to these issues except in the UN. When they are asked to vote, sometimes they are voting right, sometimes they are voting wrong, like in the case of Syria. But that's never affected their economic relations with the region, and it shouldn't. There should be separation between the dollars and the rival.
Professor Marandi, though, what do you make of it? The geopolitics, the regional conflicts, and the possibility of regional economic development cooperation with China?
Well, I think the most important project that is up for discussion and implementation is the ancient Silk Road, which is a key element of the One Belt, One Road initiative. The problem is that if we have extremism, for example, the sort of extremism like the Taliban and Al-Qaeda that we have had in Afghanistan and Pakistan, if that spreads to Central Asia, that would be a catastrophe for the implementation of the project. So it's important, it's very important for both Iran and China to work together to prevent the spread of extremism And that's one of the things that has been discussed in Tehran and was agreed upon to work together with regards to terrorism and issues pertaining to extremism. So the region in that sense and the developments in the region are important. They can't really be easily separated. If, for example, the extremism that exists in Syria, Al-Qaeda and Wahhabi extremists, and ISIL, and the same in Iraq and southern Yemen, as well as North Africa, if these, in Libya and in Nigeria, if these spread, then it would be catastrophic for world trade. So, for example, also in the two sides of the on the Arabian Peninsula in Africa, if the Al-Qaeda Wahhabi groups gain access to advanced weapons, then they could hit shipping, and that would also be a catastrophe for world trade. So I think it is key for all countries to work together to stop the extremists.
Right. Ms. He, we've seen some strategic changes in geopolitics, let's just say over the past few years. The United States, for example, not only developing its ties with Saudi Arabia, but also working on the nuclear issue with Iran, and now seem to come to a periodic success, shall we say. But some suggest that is an overall replanning of the U.S. strategy toward the Middle East. At the same time, China is saying, Ms. He, it is doing things not to gain influence in the sphere, but rather to cooperate with everyone. Is that possible? Is it possible to cooperate without trying to gain influence? Will influence help cooperation, or will influence hinder cooperation? Ms. He.
Well, I think it's fully depend on how to understand this definition of influence. I think according to President Xi's speech in the Arab League, the headquarters of Arab League, he used the 3 no to express China's policy on the Middle East. So one no is we are not seeking any proxy in that region, and the second no is we are not seeking those influence. And the third no is not seeking to fill in any so-called vacuum there. So this influence, according to my understanding, is those dominant influence. You want to becoming some hegemony there. So we don't want to seek that kind of influence. So, but if you build on your economic ties with those countries, and definitely you will get some sort of influence, like economic influence, and eventually you also get some influence to even political one, strategic one, but it's not saying hegemony. So that's different category meaning. So I think Middle East, we all know, is a region with very complicated international relations and also those different religion and different those historical background. So it's people are saying it's a graveyard even for all any outside powers if you want to get so involved in trying to get some hegemony. So we don't want to get this kind of influence.
Okay, Mr. Batarfi, what do you think? Can China really maintain and do well with that kind of strategic balance in the region? After all, China seems to be quite a newcomer into the region.
Well, I agree with Mr. Marandi that security also should be part of the cooperation. Maybe the world could convince Iran to stop exporting, to change its constitution that entitled the exportation of Shiaism, read secularism, and revolution to the world. Just the head of the Revolutionary Guard admitted that the Revolutionary Guard had trained 200,000 Arabian fighters in the region, and many of them with terrorist organizations like Hezbollah, Daesh, Al-Qaeda, which, by the way, had its headquarters until now in Iran, and other terrorist groups like the Al-Hashd al-Sha'bi.
Daesh and Al-Qaeda have their headquarters in Iran?
Concern about Oh yeah. Oh,
okay,
yeah. Oh,
great.
Yeah. Until now, Kerry said that. America said that. The United Nations said that. You have many leaders
they
of
Al-Qaeda. They are Wahhabi, just
in,
like the Saudi regime
in Iran,
okay.
and that's why
Daesh and
when you say
Al-Qaeda.
Wahhabi,
I need to
respond.
call on your
I wonder
expertise
what
in
you
this
call
regard. You have
what
already
you called
seen the
what you
exchange
call
of
the
words
terrorism
between
of
these two gentlemen coming
the
from
terrorist
Iran and
groups
Saudi
that
Arabia.
are
Totally
enlisted as terrorist
reflects
group by the
the
United Nations,
complexity,
like
complexity
Hezbollah.
of
And
bilateral
Al-Hadi Shabi,
relations
who
between
called
these
the
two
Sunnis
countries.
in Iraq with the
Mr.
support of
Badawi,
Iran.
Mr.
So let us
Badawi,
talk about
let me
this.
ask a
It is
question.
part of your constitution.
Let me
Mr.
ask a question. Ms. He,
Merandi.
I need to have your expertise. The debates between these two gentlemen, each seem to have their version of the realities, already reflects the complexity of realities in the region. Handshakes, wonderful banquets is one thing during the state visits, but on the other hand, when you are dealing with realities on the ground for China, it is going to be as complex as the two gentlemen just illustrated every day. Ms. He.
Yes, I think that's exactly also one of the China's advantages when we are engaged with countries in the Middle East, because during the past long time, we haven't sided with each any group there or country there. So we have been taking an impartial and neutral and quite objective point of view. And also for the Palestine-Israel conflict, we have been always supporting the right for the Palestinians to establish their own country. And even in our very first kind of China's Arabic countries policy, that white paper issued right in front of, in ahead of President Xi's Middle East trip, and in that white paper, we mentioned also clearly that we supported Palestinians to establish their own country according to the Treaty 1967 as a border, and East Jerusalem as the capital. So that policy, that stance, give us a credit for getting involved in those issues in the Middle East.
And before we go, I would really like to have every one of you with one sentence only, if you can, ladies and gentlemen, to help us understand what would the relations be like and what would the regions be like with Chinese President Xi Jinping's recent visit to both of your countries, and what kind of potential are you looking at? Mr. Badawi, one sentence if you can, sir.
Well, I'm looking forward to more of the good things that's been happening in the past, more cooperation in the economic side, and more understanding of the region complexities.
I see. Mr. Merandi?
That's one sentence, right?
Yes, it is. Thank you very much, sir.
I agree, but I also think that the Deputy Chancellor of Germany got it right when he said that Wahhabi extremism is being exported by Saudi Arabia to mosques across the world, and it's a threat, to Central Asia and to Chinese national security. So Saudi Arabia must be forced to stop this, the spread of this ideology.
That's why you sponsor them, huh? Good
Okay. Well, we'll have the debates about that in another session, but for now, Ms. He, your final words.
Yes, with those projects and the treaties has been signed, and the MOU has been also inked between China and the three Arab countries, I think definitely in the short term and the middle term, there will be a greater and closer economic cooperation between China and the Middle East countries. And in the long term, I think China's engagement with Middle East countries, security and peace building will also becoming a very balanced and positive power there.
He Wenping, Mohammad Merandi, and Khaled Badawi, thank you so much for the three of you and your insights.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. Really appreciate it.
Thank you.
Stay with us here on World Insight. We got our final segment coming right up. Hollywood, the Oscars are facing criticism once again for a lack of diversity, but will suggested voter quotas be enough to remedy the problem? Welcome back. You're watching World Insight on CCTV News. Next, we turn to Hollywood, an ongoing controversy about Oscar awards. This year's major Oscar nominations have displayed a complete absence of actors and filmmakers of color. Some famous black actors and filmmakers are calling for a boycott on this year's ceremony on February the 28th if the situation remains unchanged. And the Academy seems to be taking note.
Films selected as the Best Picture nominees. They are:
for the second consecutive year, the world's most watched movie awards will be given to only white actors. The Oscar acting nominees announced on January 14th included no black performers for a second straight year. Director Spike Lee and actress Jada Pinkett Smith said on Monday that they will boycott this year's ceremony. Lee, the director of Do the Right Thing and 2015's She-Ra, wrote the following comment under the Oscars So White hashtag, which emerged in 2015 for the same reason. How is it possible for the second consecutive year all 20 contenders under the actor category are white? Industry insiders echo these protests.
It's a definite problem. I mean, you can walk across, the campuses of all the studios and never really see anyone of color. And, it's something that the industry needs to correct. Film is a reflection of the world that we live in. But when you walk on a studio lot, you don't see a reflection of the world. You don't see those people.
The controversy has illustrated that there are different voices and opinions on this topic.
So is boycotting help? I don't think it helps. Does the idea that Jada Pinkett Smith said of, we shouldn't, it's a white established thing and we shouldn't judge ourselves based on that? Yeah, I think that's a pretty smart observation. It is not a black organization. It is not a 15% black organization. It should be. And if it was a 15% black organization and there were no black nominees, would there still be a anger and rage and a boycott? I don't know.
Some white actors fired back. British actress and first-time Academy Award nominee Charlotte Rampling said in a radio interview on Friday that the boycott is racist towards whites. She said that perhaps sometimes black actors have not earned a place in the final running. But later she confessed to the media saying, "I regret that my comments could have been misinterpreted." The Academy of Motion Picture Arts and Sciences, the organizers of the Oscar Awards, pledged on Friday to double its membership of women and minorities by 2020. The president of the Academy of Motion Picture Arts and Sciences, Cheryl Boone Isaacs, said that the Academy, which awards the Oscars, had already been making changes in recent years to drive diversity. But the change is not happening as fast as people would like. Critics agree the Academy needs to do more.
For more on this, we are joined here in the Beijing studio by Mr. Teng Jimeng, who is a professor of American Studies Center at the Beijing Foreign Studies University. Welcome, sir. Meanwhile, in LA, we are joined by Elizabeth Dell, who is the head of the China Task Force at the Producers Guild of America. And also, we are having on the phone Christopher Chambers, who is a professor of journalism at Georgetown University. Welcome to the three of you. First of all, very important question, I guess, to be asked here. Is it an issue of talent or an issue of color? Ms. Dell.
I think it's an issue of access. I think that there are incredibly talented actors of all kinds of people of color actors, and I think that the opportunity for them to perform and the opportunity for them to perform in films that are given the wide viewing that happens with white-driven films is not the same. I think there are absolutely incredibly, insanely talented actors. I don't think they're always given a chance to profile their skills in the way that white actors are.
Professor Chambers from Georgetown University, do you agree?
I agree wholeheartedly, and it's not just acting, it's directing, it's producing, it's writing, and getting new writers in the pipeline, so to speak. It's the technical aspects of film which make up a lot of the jobs in Hollywood that have nothing to do with being actually in front of the camera. Everything from gaffers to carpenters. And a lot of those people are in the Academy, and a lot of those people are white and males and over 40 years old. So it's not just acting; it's this whole system and industry that really is not conducive to not just African Americans, but Asian actors, Latino actors, and people wanting to tell stories that are inclusive.
Yes, indeed.
So that's the problem. It is one of access, but I mean, at the root of access, and even some white American famous actors have said this, at the root of access is color.
On the other hand, Professor Chambers, is it realistic that when the American society as a whole is still struggling with racial issues, to expect Hollywood to be totally different?
Well, I believe that a lot of that is Hollywood's fault. Hollywood has, if you look at American political culture, almost set itself up as a very progressive, liberal, sometimes even left-leaning sort of institution, when in reality, when you look at even at the elite levels of say, actor pay, you have women who are superstars in America and superstars overseas who are making not making as much as probably their less talented white male co-stars. You have African Americans who are shut out. You have white males who are making the business decisions to greenlight, as they say, certain pictures, to hire certain people, to hire a whole technical staff on these pictures, and are not telling certain stories, which is why, ironically, a lot of very cutting-edge storytelling has migrated from movies to American television. And I think an argument can be made that American television now, it has much more better quality, talent, and diversity than the filmmaking industry, which is very strange.
I see. Ms. Dell, though, can change happen overnight? Can we expect the current nomination and the next year's nomination be totally different? Is it realistic?
I think that every industry is really slow to change. I think that the film and television industries are moving in the right direction, but no, I don't think that anything's going to happen overnight. I hope that everything that's happening now will push more attention to projects, will push more films, hopefully, into greenlight that give actors of color an opportunity to present themselves and to present their talents, because I think the talent is already there. It's presenting a stage for them to be visible in the world.
Access, both emphasized by the other two panelists, have been the issue. But will the access issue be changed overnight? That is a question I think we really need to discuss here. Professor Tang, given your knowledge of the American culture as a professor coming from China in that regard, meanwhile, the fact that Hollywood, especially the Oscar nomination committee, is trying to change the numbers, for example, of whites, for example, of minority and male and female, will that make a change to the eventual nominating process and nominating results?
Well, I think like all political cultures in the United States, Hollywood is also part of this political culture. And so in this sense, I think that change in terms of the structure, the organization, will help to improve the situation. For example, I mean, if you are given, for example, another 300 positions for, I mean, the nation's minorities, I mean, absolutely minorities will not be underrepresented. Right now, minorities, and not just African Americans, but also Hispanic Americans, Asian Americans, for example, I mean, they're all underrepresented. And so I'm hoping that the structural change, the institutional and the voting change will contribute to improve that very situation.
Yeah, but on the other hand, Ms. Dell, there has been various debates in the world about quota system, whether that is a fair system or not to begin with, whether that could be certain kind of racial prejudice against any kinds of other races that we have mentioned. So what do you make of this change in the voters system when it comes to a quota? Will that change the picture? Eventually, what shall we rely on the real change of culture when it comes to racial equality in Hollywood?
I think that the changes that the Academy are making, I absolutely fully support the expansion of the Academy. I think that's essential. I think that people tend to gravitate towards people that look like them and feel like them, and they understand instinctively. And I think that's part of the real problem in the Hollywood system, is that it is run practically entirely by white men, and so they tend to want to support people who feel very comfortable to them, who are other white men. And the more you expand the Academy, the more you expand people who are looking to see the performances and to prioritize the performance of other talent in front and behind the camera that looks like them, that is comfortable to them. That being said, Hollywood is a very visible industry. We cannot be effectively colorblind because we make visual content. You see the actors, and I think it's correct that TV is leading the way right now. And as we see more content and more culture that reflects the America of today, I think there will be more understanding that content has a place and an audience and a business, and that more good business begets more business.
I
so
see.
that my hope is that it really drives the change, although it will be gradual.
Ms. Tang?
Well, I think it's a changing situation, but then once again, there are vested interests of the whites, the WASP, let's say, the white Anglo-Saxon Protestant segment within the Hollywood society, if it is a society representing the larger one in the United States. For example, I think that Ava DuVernay, the director of Selma, it's so outstanding, and her work has been nominated. Selma has been nominated, but once again, as a minority director, she has been, in a sense, looked down upon, basically repressed, and not be that very visual in Hollywood. A film about the political movement, the civil rights movement, which has not been recognized. The acting of David Oyelowo, so powerful. But then once again, I mean, with his male, white, and odd and old members of the Academy, I mean, everything was, that great work has been excluded.
All right. But there's one thing that's quite complicated, Professor Chambers. As we all know, when it comes to judgment about acting, when it comes to judgment of screenwriting, directing, it is very subjective rather than objective, a process when the judges make their decisions. So, Professor Chambers, will that really make a huge change when we talk about these quota systems? And will political efforts, in a way, really going to change the overall situation in Hollywood? Will talents, let's just say, from the white talents, for example, will they be depressed as a result of these kinds of quota system? This has been a quota system debate for every field, and people wonder whether this is also true in this regard, Professor Chambers.
Well, first of all, it's really not a quota. It's really expanding the membership and expanding access. But the more people you get involved, and again, I use American TV, American television, as the example because of further diversity, more people behind the camera, more people in front of the camera. You now have probably the best era in American television in 50 years of various diverse stories, of quality stories, of adventure or fantasy or very gritty real life, and it's because of that diversity with Asian Americans, with African Americans, Latinos, and particularly with women in front and behind the camera. So it's not really quota, it's really just more access, and when you get more access, you get more people looking at the decision-making process, because let's be frank, just because you are nominated for an Oscar, just because you win an Oscar, doesn't mean you're necessarily the best, because it is a very subjective process, true, and it is a political process within Hollywood to get people nominated, and it's a marketing process. I mean, I think we can agree that in America, just because somebody's elected president or elected a mayor or a senator doesn't mean they're the best candidate. But so there is that kind of a marketing machine behind a lot of these movies. But if you have a situation where somebody is nominated because the white male establishment in Hollywood just likes that person, that doesn't, I think that more access, more diversity will have a damper on that, and it will
Right.
give people more choice, and it will give more voices and different perspectives, and that's a
I
good
see.
thing for
I see.
Hollywood.
And Ms. Dell, before we go, final question for you. Fairness, access, how much can we expect things to change with the new policy?
I think that, for the Oscar broadcast on the 28th, the nominees are announced, and that will be the contests that we see that play out in the next months. I think next year, the year following, who knows? I hope that all of this actually drives more projects into Greenlight. It would be wonderful if this, all of this controversy actually prod some studios into saying, this is a great opportunity for us to do that project that we weren't sure about, and to highlight acting from people of color, to highlight talents of people of color. And so hopefully by next year there'll be a really interesting field of performances and of work to watch. But
Wow.
I'm hopeful.
Okay, well, let's all be hopeful. Elizabeth Dell, Teng Ji-meng, and also Christopher Chambers. Thank you so much for the three of you for being with us. And that is all the time we have for today. If you'd like to see more of our program, visit our website. Just type in World Insight CCTV News into your search engine. You will be able to find us. Or you can also check out our YouTube channel. From me, Tian Wei, and everyone at the World Insight team, thanks for watching, and tune in again next time tomorrow for more insights from across China and around the world. Good night.